Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Book Jacket, CCPL's author series. My name is Kate Merlene. I'm the adult librarian here at the Orange Branch. And we are so excited to have Jeremy Kahn here. We'll discuss his latest book, Mastering AI, a survival guide to our superpowered future. Publishers Weekly says of the book, quote, striking a balance between bullishness and caution, Kahn sets out a helpful roadmap for harnessing the promise of AI while navigating its perils. The result is one of the more convincing assessments of how AI will transform society. Our partner, Max Facts Books, is in the back here, and he's selling the title, and you can have that sign out with the program. Our refreshments have been generously provided by our Orange Branch friends at the library, and so please help yourself to those. And now I'd like to introduce our speakers. Jeremy Kahn is an award-winning journalist for Fortune magazine, where he covers artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies. In addition to cover stories and features, he writes Fortune's weekly Eye on AI newsletter and co-chairs its Brainstorm AI technology conferences. Previously, he wrote about technology, including AI, for Bloomberg, a former managing editor of the New Republic. His writing on a range of subjects has also appeared in the New York Times, Newsweek, The Atlantic, Smithsonian Magazine, the Boston Globe, New Republic, and Slate. An Ohio native, I see a lot of friends and family here tonight. He now lives with his family in Oxford, England. Tonight, Jeremy Kahn will be in conversation with Todd Federman, Managing Director of North Coast Ventures, whose membership consists of more than 200 of the region's leading investors, entrepreneurs, and business leaders who are dedicated to accelerating early stage ventures. Please give them a warm welcome.
Thank you for hosting us here, and thank you all for being here. It's a lot of fun to be back, and welcome Jeremy back to Cleveland, native son here.
Thank you. The mic work? Okay, yes, it sounds like it.
Yeah. I'll speak up a little. If anyone can't hear, feel free to wave from the back. But as you heard, Jeremy has had an esteemed career in business journalism. Is leading a really interesting lead at Fortune with AI, and has the ear of a lot of very interesting business leaders nationally and globally. So it's fun to have you here and have the conversation. Before jumping in, I want to take a moment to gauge the group's comfort with AI, experience with AI, no judgments here, but we'll ask for you're a 1, a 2, or a 3. So you're a 3 if you use an AI tool most days, you're comfortable with it, you read a lot about AI, you're interested in AI. So we've got a column. And number 2, you've tried ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude once or twice. You keep an eye on this, but perhaps not on a daily basis. Okay, unsure. And the number 1, no judgment here. Number 1's here. Haven't really used it, probably don't think about it a lot. Maybe, although recognize it's important, it's just not something that comes up on a daily basis. Okay, so that's most people. That is helpful. So Jeremy will help ground us in the history and context of how we got to where we are today and where we're going. So I might just start out, Jeremy, and ask if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to write this book.
Yeah, so as Kate said, I've been covering AI as a journalist for 8 years, starting at Bloomberg and now at Fortune. So I've been following the progression of technology, and as you probably know, AI has been sort of advancing that entire time. There were developments happening, but most of that was sort of happening behind the scenes of software that we use every day. There's a lot of things on our phones that we're using various kinds of machine learning, which is a sort of subcategory of AI, to help us do things like suggest which apps we might want to use on our iPhone at one particular time of day. But most people didn't really think about that as AI. It didn't seem anything like the AI we've encountered in science fiction and movies and novels. And so most people wouldn't have really thought about that as AI. And then suddenly in November, late November of 2022, OpenAI debuted ChatGPT, and suddenly you had this thing that you could talk to using something that looked a lot like the search bar you were kind of used to using from Google. And I think it was this sort of eureka, or as I say in the book, a kind of light bulb moment where everyone suddenly realized, oh my God, there's this technology out there that I can converse with. It can answer questions on almost any subject reasonably well, not always accurately, but with some degree of accuracy, and certainly a high degree of plausibility for its answers. It can string together, large amounts of text. It can analyze things. It can write poetry. It can summarize my meeting in poetry, which is, and this was pretty incredible to people. So I think that's when I think everyone realized this was a really big deal. And at the same time, I've been thinking about, did I want to write a book around this technology for a while? But after that ChatGPT moment, I wrote a big cover story for Fortune on OpenAI and ChatGPT and how that had come about. And I got some offers that did I want to expand that into a book, and I didn't really want to write that book. Some other journalists I know have kind of written or are writing books like that. They're just about OpenAI. I wanted to write a book that would sort of tell people what does this technology mean for us? What are the likely ramifications of this technology? Where are we heading? A little bit about how we got here, but mostly about where we're going. And so that's the book I decided to write. That's the book that became Mastering AI.
Terrific. So that sounds like where we are today. Let's talk a little bit more about that. Do you sit down all the time with business leaders, CEOs, CIOs, recently with Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft? What are you hearing as far as how enthusiastic, how timid, how far they're leaning forward with their investments and what they think?
Yeah, well, if you're talking about Microsoft or big tech company like that, they're obviously very enthusiastic, leaning way out into this technology and have kind of bet the farm on this technology. I think if you talk to business leaders in non-tech industries, there's a bit, people are interested in embracing the technology. There's a lot of pressure on boards to be seen to be doing something with technology. I think there's some hesitancy about how quickly to actually deploy the technology in widespread uses because of a whole bunch of concerns that we talk about, but concerns about reliability and trust, concerns about data privacy, concerns about cost, and value. How do you really get value out of the technology? So all of those things are, I think, holding back sort of widespread adoption in many businesses. But most businesses kind of have plans that keep trying to adopt the technology. A lot are trying various proofs of concept. And as I argue in the book, I think within 5 years, it's going to be a very different picture. I think we're going to see very widespread adoption of what I call sort of AI copilots. These are technologies that are designed to help professionals in a particular kind of industry niche do a particular professional task. And I think that's going to be something we're all going to be using. Those of us who are working in various professions or knowledge workers, I think will be using very widely within the next 5 years.
And to think about at this moment, if there are 3 buckets of AI usage within an organization or potential AI usage, one is where the organization has said, we're open to empowering our employees with these tools. We want them in your hands. You are the people closest to the problems and the opportunities, and we can't top down figure out how AI is going to impact our organization. We need this in the hands of our teammates to do it. Number 2, where they say, we're not letting it in the front door, right? It's blocked at the firewall and it's too risky. Number 3 is what's characterized as a secret cyborgs, where it's number 2, plus everybody's using it on their own anyway. Right? Because they get twice as much done, it takes half the time, it's like having an assistant. Are you seeing an evolution in how that adoption is playing out?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think there was, and this is the sort of secret cyber thing. It's funny, but it's absolutely true. There are a lot of people using this technology even when they're not supposed to be using this technology. And I think firms have realized that, businesses have realized that, and they sort of felt like, well, we have to do something to enable people to use this technology since they're using it anyway. So then the idea has been to try to bring it into some sort of in-house system on their own cloud very often, where they feel like they have some control over what the employees are doing with it, over data privacy, some control over how much it's being used. I think we're seeing people move more into that camp. It's still, most places are trying a bottom-up kind of approach. I think they're just kind of putting these tools in the hands of as many employees as possible and saying, just experiment with it, try to use it, try to figure out what it can be useful for. A few are taking a more top-down approach where they've created kind of centers of excellence. They're trying to create their own AI models specifically based on their own data. That often is very expensive processing, requires specific expertise. But some larger firms are definitely doing that, but it's more of a centralized kind of approach.
We'll talk for a minute about the speed at which this is happening. 'Cause it's easy to look at things we know, right? How quickly we went from 8-track to beta to VHS, or what happens, the difference between an iPhone 13 and an iPhone 15 isn't that much, right? 2 years, there's only so much that happens. What's happened in the last 2 years, though, has been extraordinary. The next generation models are already fully trained and being tested today. So what's your sense of just this exponential growth of capability and our ability to even interpret the tools and the resources we're getting our hands on?
Yeah, I think there are several things that sort of make this different than previous technological revolutions. And I, as I say in the book, I think one is, there's sort of three things. One is speed. So it is happening very fast. We had ChatGPT have over 100 million users within, I think, 3 months of its debut, which is the fastest growing consumer technology up until that point. Much faster than Facebook, for instance. Much faster than if you think about cellular phones or something like that. There were, analog cellular phones back in the 80s, and certainly then there were digital versions in the 90s before the iPhone, and everyone suddenly had one in their pocket. Well, the very kind of architecture on which current AI systems are built was only invented in 2017. So that's 7 years to get to the point we are now. So I think there is this acceleration in the speed of adoption, and it's very hard for people to deal with technology that changes that quickly. And I think that is a challenge. The other thing is it's very broad technology. So anyone who's conversed with ChatGPT, had dialogue with ChatGPT, probably knows you can kind of ask it about anything, and it potentially be used for a lot of different things. And the same underlying models we use to kind of automate parts and tasks across many different job categories. And I think that is also very different than previous technologies, which tended to just do one specific narrow task well. And that potential displacement is another challenge of technology. And I think the third big challenge of technology is previous technology did not tend to challenge the very centrality of what we think of that makes us human. And so other technologies like the steam engine or electricity essentially were kind of motive power. So they did things to move objects around in factories where they could light the world, which is cool, but we had other things that had really done that. And we had animals in the world that we had used for motive power for years, and we never sort of thought of ourselves as a species as our preeminent characteristic being our strength, but definitely our intellect was always the thing that humans prided themselves on, thought made them unique as a species on the planet. And now you have this system, this piece of software that seems to challenge that. And we can talk about whether it really does, but it's that perception that it does that I think has made this very different than other technology.
Let's go back to that. I think there'll be some interest in that. Tell us about what we're going to experience, right, as far as our ability to do more faster, to think more deeply about certain problems, to extend life in other ways. What are the benefits you think in the next couple of years? It's hard to see any farther past a couple of years.
Right. So I think certainly the big positives of this technology, one is around, and there's a caveat here, I think if we get it right, and to get it right, we're going to have to do some very specific things, which we can talk about also, but there is this chance to have a real big boost in labor productivity, and I think many developed economies need that. And it could just save people from a lot of tasks that are really not that much fun to do in your day-to-day job. And you can outsource those to these AI assistants. Everyone becomes much more efficient, much more productive, potentially gains time to spend on higher value-added tasks. And that's one of the really big positive benefits of the technology. Another big positive, I think, is going to be in the whole realm of science and medicine. AI is a fantastic tool for the advancement of science. And in particular, I think when it comes to healthcare, there's tremendous opportunities to improve human healthcare, human health, human wellness, and potentially extend lifespans through better drug discovery. So it's sort of AI, the same kind of language models that underpin things like ChatGPT are being used to discover drugs and new pharmaceuticals. There's also the chance to pair the same technology with wearable devices and create much more personalized medicine and much more personalized healthcare. So I think that's tremendous. But actually, across all the sciences, there's tremendous potential to use AI to find new materials, which might help us with sustainability issues, new batteries, which can be huge for the electrification of the world now with fighting climate change. So just tremendous potential there. And then the other big area that I think is a huge positive is actually in education. And that was interesting because that's one of the areas where people got very upset when ChatGPT came out was education. People were very worried that students would just use the technology to cheat. And I think there are concerns about cheating, but I think there are steps that educational institutions can take to cut down on cheating. And actually, this gives everybody the chance to have a personal tutor in their pocket. And I think that should be tremendous for what it can do for students and potentially to help with learning, help make people lifelong learners, because you don't have to give this thing up when you graduate from high school or college. You can keep having it teach you throughout your life. So I think that's another huge positive for the technology.
Absolutely. Some of the science-based innovations you mentioned today, I think, are happening today, right? So AlphaFold on protein development, precision oncology, telemedicine, where they're identifying dermatology issues in real time, in a couple hours versus waiting 8 weeks to schedule an appointment. It's powerful stuff. You mentioned the jobs. I think a lot of people think of the jobs. There's going to be a lot of change, right?
Yeah.
As far as employment, because there are so many tasks that can be done better and faster by software. And it's hard to get past that. There's still a lot that makes us, but what's your best sense? Are we talking tens of millions of jobs over the next decade when we think of customer service and long-haul trucking and legal support?
Yeah.
Positions?
I don't put a number on it, but I think, and I don't think we're going to see huge job losses. I mean, there are some people very concerned about they're all going to be out of work, and I think that's a bit of a red herring. I do not think we're all going to lose our jobs. I think there's going to be plenty of jobs to go around, but people's jobs will change, and what they do is going to change. And I think very few people can expect to do exactly the same thing, exactly the same way 5 years from now as they're doing it today. And that's scary to people too. You have that kind of disruption. That has to be managed. But I think if you look at, yes, AI can automate a lot of tasks. I talked to Eric Brainstorm for the book, who's a Stanford economist, and he's done some of the best studies on this. And most jobs consist of lots and lots of tasks, usually several dozen tasks. And in most cases, AI can automate like 3 to 5 of those tasks completely. So that still leaves lots of things for people to do. It's not the case that whole jobs can be automated. Even things like call centers, which is one of the areas where AI is being adopted most rapidly. For the most part, you still need a human call handler to deal with customer service complaints or inquiries. But what AI can do is it can provide, first of all, it can classify the call much faster, get it to the best person to handle that call. It pulls up documentation for the call handler in real time, so the person can provide more accurate information faster. And it can sort of coach the person in the conversation. So those are, but you still sort of need a human there. And there's still issues that are beyond the ability of chatbots to do it in a completely automated way. And that's one of the areas where it's sort of being used most, adopted most quickly. And I think if you look at other areas, it's going to be a much slower kind of evolution of what people do. I don't think we're going to see huge job losses across the board, but I do think most people's jobs will change.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting balance. Because on one hand, if we look over 40 years, I think the number of toll booth operators has gone down from 50, 60,000 to a couple thousand. But the number of bank tellers has only gone down from, I believe it's 450,000 to about 250,000. And part of the reason it hasn't gone down as much is because of the efficiency. There are more bank branches, right? So they're able to offer more services. I think the question mark is how that plays out across the whole.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can move potentially to higher value services. That's one of the things I argued in the book is potentially you can take people who have less training, less experience, and move them into professions that they couldn't do, and particularly in areas where we don't have enough people. So accounting is one. There just aren't enough accountants to go around, particularly not enough CPAs. And there's a huge shortage. They're talking about lowering standards as a way to try to have enough public company accountants out there. And then one way you could potentially address that unmet need, it would be to have people who maybe don't have full qualification, but are able to move into those roles assisted by an AI co-pilot. And then you actually don't have job loss. You have more people moving into those professions. And you can actually reverse potentially what's happened over the last several decades when you had people kind of squeezed out of the middle class, often into hospitality and service jobs with the loss of manufacturing. Some of those people, and with the need for more education for some of these jobs. you could potentially have people moved up into higher value work.
That's good. So I thought this was going to be fully a pessimistic portion of the conversation. I can run it back to optimism, which is good. I'll take together with just for a minute, and we'll come back. Politics. As most people have noticed, this is an election year. It's harder than ever to know if what you're seeing is actually real. As one example, 2 nights ago, Elon Musk had an interview with former President Trump. While there were technical difficulties, someone posted a deep fake interview of the two of them. So a fairly realistic, actual conversation. And at the high point, there were 200,000 people watching. And that's more people than decided the last election. When you take the swing states and the last one. So where are we? What do we do? How do we prevent this polarization from turning into just an untenable political mess?
Yeah, well, this is, I have to say, I'm afraid, one of the areas where I'm less optimistic. I think in the near term, there's not too much we can do. Certainly nothing to do this election cycle. And I think even next election cycle, we're going to have to struggle with this. It is very difficult right now to have reliable technology that can tell deepfake from real video or real audio. There are watermarking technologies, and I think those should be mandated actually for AI-produced content. But it's pretty easy if you're intending to spread misinformation. It's very easy to remove that marking technology in some cases. And yeah, I just think we're going to see. Bless you. I think it's going to be very hard to police that. I do think there's some things I said in the book that I think we could do that would help a little bit. One would be to mandate typical watermarking on legitimate, on content. That will help some things. On the other, I would say is that I think we should actually ban the use of deep fakes by political campaigns in their advertising. So there's this idea that maybe the technology would be a great thing to use for legitimate political communication. And we see this in India and other countries where candidates, will do a video of themselves speaking like a local language that they do not actually speak. And that's, people said, well, that's great because now you can reach a new audience. And I actually think that's not great because it makes it really hard to police authentic or inauthentic content. And so I think a sensible thing to do would actually just be ban the use of the technology in a quote-unquote legitimate purpose, like political communication. So then at least deepfake is, if it's out, if you're going to see a deepfake, it's something that's designed for some sort of malicious purpose. Otherwise, it just gets too confusing. I think there's a huge problem around trust and authenticity, and AI makes this much worse. And there's not a clear solution to that soon. But I think some of those steps will help a little bit.
So let's come back to the humanity portion of it. So on one hand, so it's here, the two faces out of the tube, trains on a station, pick your metaphor. It's not going to go in reverse. But there are currently mental health applications which are really impactful, where people can get instant counseling and background when they don't have access to people. But they can also have online girlfriends. They can also have longer term relationships with chatbots that simulate relationships in a way that is actually very satisfying to an individual's psyche. And that has some consequences too, as young people become middle-aged people, become older people, and our society moves on. Maybe talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I'm most worried about. It's the use of AIs and companions or chatbots or as a substitute for real human relationships. And I think it's something we have to be very cautious of and mindful of, and I think need, again, some sort of rules around, particularly for children, how often, how many hours a day could they use an AI companion chatbot? Do we want companies marketing these products to children in that way? Because I think it's very dangerous. I think it would be very, certainly for a certain subsection of the population, it would be very tempting to have a relationship with an AI chatbot all the time, somebody you can always talk to, and is never makes any demands of you because it's not human. It has no needs, it wants, desires. So that's very convenient. I mean, that sounds great, right? It's all the things you want from a human relationship, but none of the things that are annoying. And I think that's be very tempting for people that just use these all the time. And I think that's one of the real risks of the technology that we should be very mindful of.
Yeah. And there's this other aspect that, anthropomorphizing, right? If you're treating something that's not human as something that's human, we probably all do that with our pets, right? We spend a lot of time and a lot of money on our pets. It's genuinely a harmless thing that we all know the difference of. But there are a lot of ways that that changes, partially related to what you mentioned, Jeremy, partially related to people not being able to understand the difference. If anyone here has seen some of the demos of AI voice, where currently ChatGPT-O has in a demo environment a real conversational voice where it's not, hey Siri, 5 seconds, wrong answer, and it's an actual conversation which understands your tone, your inflection, your mood, seems to pick up on sarcasm. And you can interrupt it. You can be rude to it. And most people who watch these demos actually don't feel good. They don't feel good watching somebody be rude to a piece of software, right? So in lots of ways, right? Like when I heard you say "bless you," I thought, will our Alexas be telling us "bless you"? Is that meaningful?
Yeah.
Right? How does that work? But drawing the line is harder and harder.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to get difficult, and it's very hard. That tendency to anthropomorphize is real. It's very hard to avoid. I'm not sure we can avoid it completely. There are some people out there who say, we really should stop referring, to these systems in any way that would make them seem more human. We should get them names. I think it's very hard. That's going to be impossible actually to resist. And the companies that are pushing the technology have a real interest in trying to feed our tendency to anthropomorphize actually, because it makes the products more addictive, more likable. I think it's going to be very hard to do anything about that, but I think we should be very cautious about how we use the products. We should always remember they aren't really human, even if we try to refer to them in human ways. And I think, yes, we need to watch how what the discourse is with a chatbot. There's interesting things on Alexa. It was for a long time, people were being very rude to Alexa. And I talked to one of the researchers in the book who has done did a bunch of studies on people talking to Alexa. Some of which are really disturbing. So it turned out if you gave men in particular an Alexa and told them, when they thought they were in an environment where nobody was listening to what they were saying, they would say, be really rude to the Alexa. And also, they then tried it in different ways. So if they had a male voice, they were less rude to Alexa than if they had a female voice. If they thought someone was listening, they were less rude than when they thought nobody was listening. They also did some experiments with children. Children tended to be kind of rude to Alexa too. And then Amazon actually, in response to the study on children, created a mode you can set with Alexa actually so that it only answers if you say please, thank you. And I think that's not a good idea. I think like when we evolve these more sophisticated chatbots, the idea that they should try to reinforce certain cultural norms around politeness would not be a bad thing.
Absolutely. So one more pessimistic, and we'll come back to this piece. So let's talk about regulation. How do we control this, right? So we're at a point where there's now semi-autonomous warfare. There's the ability for these large foundation model companies to train based on anything they can get their hands on, YouTube videos, an op-ed I may have written, a story if it's not behind the paywall that you've written. It's extraordinary, and these tools are used by individuals, by companies, by governments, like the United States, governments that are very friendly to us and those that do not wish us well. So as we think about trying to balance a regulatory environment that doesn't try to prevent the future, which is impossible, but tries to make it as manageable for all of us and safe for all of us as possible, is there a path?
I think there is a path. I think we do need regulation around the technology, and I think we need it urgently. And I don't think we can kind of take a wait and see approach. I don't think we should repeat the same mistakes we made with social media, which was to say, well, let's wait and see what the harms are before we try to do anything about it. It was very hard to actually do anything about the harms, it turns out, once they have an entrenched interest in it or benefiting from the technology in its current form. So I think we do need regulation. I think the FTC could play this role in the US, but I do think we need some legislation as well. And I think we should be careful about things like business models. So one of the things I'm most worried about is that we'll have, very soon we're going to have these AI agents. So right now we have chatbots that you just can provide content or co-pilots that can produce documentation. very soon we're going to have things that will actually kind of go out and do our bidding across the internet for us. We've given an instruction. Right now, ChatGPT is pretty good at planning a vacation or suggesting an itinerary for a vacation, but it won't actually go out and do all the booking for you. What's coming next, and I think the preliminary sort of versions of this will be out even next year, will be something that will actually go out and do all the purchasing for you, and will actually, and potentially negotiate on your behalf. And when you have systems like this, I think we want to know that system. Well, there's one big danger in a system like that is it has to know a lot about you or your company in order to act effectively. So it's a privacy issue, and that we're going to have some rules about data privacy. But the other big problem is that when it goes out to transact on my behalf, I want to know that it's actually selecting things that I would like based on what it knows about me, not things that some advertiser paid the tech company to feed to me. And I think you're already seeing a sort of slippery slope of business models. And it's seeing it in kind of an interesting way. So a lot of the chatbot creators have struck deals with actually news organizations in order to get higher quality content, where they, and right now it works that the chatbot companies and tech companies are paying the news companies for that content. But I think it's sort of, as part of the deals, the news companies are also stipulating they want their content displayed more prominently in the responses. And that's where I think the danger is we're getting into. It seems great when it's a legitimate news source, but I think it sort of sets a precedent that I think advertisers are going to start pointing to also. And they're going to start paying the tech companies to say, okay, I'll pay you this amount of money you can have my whole catalog of things that I have online so the chatbot can access it, but I want my stuff displayed more prominently in the responses. And I think then you're going to have an issue. Is that disclosed to people? How transparent is that disclosure? Are people going to know that? Otherwise, you're going to have this situation where people are going to be influenced in their decisions in a way that I think is manipulative. So I think we need some rules around business models. I think we could use rules around what data is. We're going to need some rules around copyright. That's ultimately going to be decided by the courts. Although I think what's happening actually is that even without those decisions, we're kind of moving to a licensing regime anyway, because a lot of companies take steps to guard their content from being scraped. And a lot of artists have taken steps now to protect their content online. I talk about that a little bit in the book. There's various techniques that artists can use that make it very hard for these models to use their work. Now that everyone knows that their stuff's being scraped, everyone's kind of putting up these defenses. And as a result, I think we're moving to a regime where companies have to license the data anyway. Then the question becomes under what terms, and that can be decided kind of commercially, I think. But I do think we're going to need some clear rules around copyright, but I think we'll get them from the courts, or we're going to get them from the Copyright Office fairly soon.
So 2 more questions, then we'll have time for questions from the audience, then a little book signing. Question number 1, though, just for the average person, what should they be reading? How much experimentation should they take on a daily basis to just have a basic familiarity with where we're going, so as not to be left behind?
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage people to play around with various of these chatbot technologies that are out there. A lot of them are available for free. It's worth sort of experimenting with them to sort of see what they can do and trying different ones. There's Kahn from Anthropic. There's Meta has one, which is called Meta AI, Gemini from Google. There's ChatGPT. I think you have to kind of play with different ones and see what they're good at and what they're not good at. I think it's worth kind of experimenting with and seeing what you can get them to do. I don't think you necessarily have to give it all your data. I don't think you necessarily have to use it all the time. I think it's just worth playing around with a bit and seeing what's possible. And I think it's worth, you can read my book, but you can read lots of other books, other publications out there on this too. And I think it's worth reading because the technology is changing very quickly. So that's the other thing. So anything that's true about it today or not true about it today is likely to be true about it, 6 months from now.
So last question, I need some parenting advice. We have kids about the same age, and these are kids who are digital first, who are far faster on their phones than their parents or grandparents, who are living in a world where their friends are getting devices sooner than they are, that need those devices to actually function in school or some form of devices, and now have and will soon have increasing access to a whole series of models, some general, some very specific. How do you think about giving a young person, in some cases a very young person, the tools and experiences they will need to be successful with over the next 60 years, 70 years, 80 years? Some of these life extending AI applications, maybe much, much more, but not turn them into inward dysfunctional people. Because part of raising a kid is having a kid who likes to be around other people, and other people like to be around them, and actually wants to learn. So how do you strike a balance, do you think, between access, tools, guidance, norms, what have you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be difficult because I think, again, it's a lot of sort of an extension of some of the trends we see in social media, which have not been good, for kids. I think you want kids to use the technology because they're going to have to learn how to use it. On the other hand, I think you need very clear limits about how often it's used and in what context. And I particularly, as I said earlier, I worry about the use of chatbots as kind of companions or friends. I think that it's okay to use the data to do a little bit. Have a kid have an AI companion chatbot that uses an hour a day. Like, that's it. I wouldn't want him using it much more than that, actually, because I do think it becomes kind of a crush. And I think it's okay to have a child play around with chatbot and see what it can do, see how you might prompt it. Again, you don't want a child using it to cheat on their homework. So again, I think the schools can do certain things. I talk about in the book some techniques I think around education that we can cut down on cheating, but it's also up to parents I think to supervise to some extent what the kid's doing. That's always hard, as we've seen with social media. And I know it's always, but you put all these parental controls in place, the kids are going to get around it, or they're always asking for more time. And I think it's going to be hard to police this, but I think we're going to have that kind of negotiation. I don't think you should ban the use of it. I mean, there are some people, but I think there are actually a lot of positive benefits to the technology, and I think we're all going to have to use it in our jobs. So getting used to using it is a good thing. I don't think it's one of these things where you could, it would be better off just banning kids from using it. I don't think that's true. But I do think you probably need pretty strict limits on what you're using it for and mostly how long you're using it, I think, each day.
No cranial implants.
Yeah. Well, that's also, that may be coming too, but much further down. That was another time. It's going to be a long time since, while people are working on great computer interfaces, which is very interesting, I think it's going to be a long time until those are available to people outside of a specific therapeutic context.
Questions from the group?
What's the dividing line between computing and AI? I tend to think of everything as AI using a computer, and I don't think that's right.
Yeah, there are various definitions. I tend to define it as technology that is software technology specifically designed to mimic human intellect and thought, and that can learn. I think learning is a key part of it. So traditional coding was all these rules, and it couldn't. Those were software that did not learn from data. It had a deterministic input and output. I'd say AI software is not a deterministic, mapping input to output, and it learns the probabilistic mapping through data, so that it trains on. And I'd say that's also a feature of all kind of AI, at least all modern.
Which is a simple example I've heard of that is an example of writing pages and pages and pages of code that could help software identify a cat. Right? You define that it has two eyes, and yours kind of go up a little bit, and they have a tail that you can see. There'll be different aspects, and if you program that really well, you can identify most of the cats. That's the traditional software approach. The AI approach is to use a visual orientation and to give it 20 pictures of the cat. Say, these are all cats. Now tell us if these other things are cats. And the powerful thing about that is not just the increased speed and efficiency, but if you have that capability, you can now identify dogs and rhinoceroses and tumors. And right, I mean, there are a lot of things that can be taught, and that's the power of one of the powers of AI.
Thank you.
And first of all, to answer your question about children, although my son is all grown, when computers came out, I took classes so that I kept up with my children and knew what they were doing. Not as well as they did, but I still understand. So my next question is, your next book should be on quantum computing.
Oh yeah, you're not the first person to guess that. That is what, yeah. So that's, quantum computing is another one of the technology is coming along. May have some overlap with AI and how it's used. We'll see. It's a little further off, I think, but not much.
My son looks like not that
Not that far.
You mentioned
cheating in classes. It's very hard to make this distinction. Let's suppose you were teaching a university composition class.
Yeah.
Would you discourage the use of AI by downgrading and so on? Or would you want to help the students incorporate the use of AI into standard compositions?
Yeah, I think it depends on the point of the class is. So if you want to teach people English language composition, I think I would not let someone have the AI do the entire composition. But you might have to say, it's okay if you want to write a first draft of this yourself, and then you want to have the AI act as an editor and critique what you've written. That might be a good use of it. It might actually save the teachers is fine. And so I think that would be okay. The question is, if you're the professor, how are you going to know what the student's done? And you might say, one way you might do it is say you have to do the entire thing in a particular software environment where I can see what you've done. And but then the problem is the so they do the thing and they well, it would have to be very particular environment. You would have to limit the ability to cut and paste in from something else. But it's possible to envision that kind of usage. Or you have a very strict honor code and you say, okay, you cheat, you kind of cheat yourself, but and if you get caught, you're expelled from the university or whatever. But that's another way to potentially do it. But if the class were something else, if it were a class where the point was not necessarily composition, but something else, then I think it might be okay to say it's all right. Particularly depending again on the context. Let's say it's a student who doesn't speak English as a native language, and the class is actually maybe it's a history class where the point is actually do the research. You're supposed to do original research. Then you're going to write a report or something on the original research. It might be okay in that context to say to the student, okay, you have to do the research yourself. You have to show that you went and found original sources. And anyway, for original sources, they're not on the internet for the most part. Some of them are now, digitized, but a lot of them aren't. You have to do that. But then it's okay if you then want to prompt an AI system with what you found and have it write the report for you because that's helping you with something you didn't know, and it's maybe not fair to penalize the student because they're not a native English speaker. That might be a different context for it to be okay, but I think it's context dependent. And I think it's going to depend on what rules you have in place. And in every case, you might want to have the student do all that in some sort of environment, software environment, where the teacher has more control over what the student does. And there are several of these being developed. So.
Right. Just a quick question. So you talked about the way in which jobs may change a bit.
Yeah.
You're doing job 1 through 12, and 3 of them get dropped off.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've heard, and I'm curious about your point of view, is that this is going to eliminate lots of barriers to entry. So new businesses are going to be created that are going to basically destroy, replace businesses that are out there today. I hope there aren't any lawyers here in town. But if I think about, if I'm a lawyer and I want to create a law firm, I can really use AI to do that virtually overnight and eliminate a lot of the capabilities out there. I wonder about barriers to entry and the creation of new industries replacing existing companies and industries.
Yeah, well, I think you're going to see these two interesting cross-cutting
Yes,
trends.
sorry, just a request to repeat the question.
Oh.
I think the idea was
repeat the question.
Sure.
certainly, will AI meaningfully reduce barriers to entry so that new entrants will be able to introduce new products faster? As an example, an AI first law firm.
Or replace existing businesses.
Yeah, so I think it's going to depend on. There's going to be these interesting cross-cutting trends, and I think one thing we're going to see is absolutely what you're talking about, where you have people, go out and start new businesses, small boutique firms, because they have the expertise and the human relationships, which are not going to be replaced by AI. Yet they won't need so much support staff and a lot of junior colleagues and a lot of executive assistants and this sort of thing. And they can use AI systems to do a lot of that work, which should, I think, lead a lot of those people to go out and create kind of boutique firms. And we might see a lot of new business creation in professions. I think the thing that will act against that to some degree will be the other big thing about AI is do you have data that's particularly useful and proprietary? Now, some professional services may not, but a lot of the really big ones may. They may have a particular library, for instance, of contracts on my particular kind of real estate transaction that nobody else has. They may have the best sort of library out there on that, they can probably fine tune an AI chatbot better than anybody else to draft contracts for that particular kind of transaction. And they may be able to use, various clauses to prevent that intellectual property from escaping the firm, which may make it so that they still have an advantage. So I think you're going to see as businesses really think about what is the data I have that's going to convey, provide a unique advantage, and how can I take advantage of that, and how can I prevent it from walking out the door when my employees walk out the door? Because I do think it's going to be harder to hold the employees in place potentially going forward.
We want to get to it. Okay.
Because we should probably
Okay.
sign it,
We'll go back.
In the back, that's me. Thank you. My name is Jay. I drove 3 counties to be here tonight.
Thank you for coming.
Really enthusiastic. Is it easier on your heads if I get a little closer? It's more fair, right? I will admit I am maybe the biggest AI enthusiast in this room. We could compare numbers later. I was up all night arguing with Inflection. It's a company that designed Pi, the talking AI. Now, I'm 56, and I'm guessing some of you are my age or older. That's quite all right, because medical technology may extend your lives within 3 years, and we'll have that talk later. But right now, I want to present to you, you're a good moderator, and you're a great guest. And I want to say, I have 2 topics, but you tell me what you want me to expound on in 1 minute. I was arguing with Inflection, the Pi company. I want you to try Pi by Infinity. It's a talking AI, and I have no financial interest in it. I like it because I got my 89-year-old father to try AI for the first time.
Yeah.
By engaging with this talking AI, where you don't have to type, but you're hand-handed like me. You don't have to talk.
It's like we're gonna push you to the question. Sorry.
I apologize. Would you rather me talk about why I want Pi to go forward with retaining user data so it doesn't have amnesia the next day and forgets all your favorite foods? Or would you rather hear me talk about why I'm going into AI as a career and I'm leaving my traditional accounting role because I believe it will be gone anyway in 18 months from now?
Let me hijack that if I can.
It's all you.
And I'll hijack that to the notion of people changing careers based on AI capability and this giving individuals the ability to start something new.
Yeah, well, I think there's tremendous potential in that. And I think people can use this technology to learn about a new profession, potentially enter a new profession where they, without having had some of the traditional qualification or experience for that, it maybe not none, but less. And I think that should enable a lot more people to go into new fields. And I think, again, if you talk about what skills, I often get asked what skills students should, what do you tell students they should learn? And I think the key is to really be flexible, because I think we're all going to have to change a lot over the course of our careers, even more so than the case in the last few decades. And so, but I think AI can help with that.
Terrific. I think we can slip in 2 more, and apologies to all the people here that we don't, and I'm just randomly pointing in directions, so I'll apologize, but sir.
The Magnificent Seven is there for a reason. Now, can money be made from this?
Definitely money to be made. A lot of money. But I don't, it's interesting. So people say, well, are we in a bubble and are these companies overvalued? I mean, I think both things can be true. It's very likely we are in a bubble, but also money can be made. And I think, I was recently at a conference with learning a lot of venture capitalists, and they just sort of said that, well, look at every other platform shift. For every, if you look at the internet boom and then crash, for every Amazon that was successful and came out of that, there was a web fan. And it's possible that some of these companies are the kind of web fans of AI. They will not last. They will not all be successful. But I think there's a tremendous amount of money for some of them to make. Now, does that mean NVIDIA should be worth $3 trillion? I'm not sure it does. I mean, I think the calculations on that are, they would have to produce every single AI chip that's ever going to be used for this technology for the next several decades to justify the valuation. So that's hard. At $3 trillion, that becomes hard to justify. Do I think NVIDIA is going out of business? No, I don't think so. Not anytime soon. But will there be challenges? I think there's going to be a lot of new chip companies that come up. And I think they're going to take some, maybe not significant, but some market share from NVIDIA. So I'll be kind of interested to see how that plays out. And I think the same might be true of some of the big software companies. But so far what we've seen is actually startup software companies have had troubles. The cost of compute is so high that they're really struggling on their own, even often backed by many hundreds of millions, if not in billions of dollars of venture capital. That we've just seen in the last few weeks a few of these, including Inflection, not that long ago, the company that originally made Pi that John was talking about. The core team of that company was hired all by Microsoft, and they licensed the technology back out, so the investors from Inflection got paid something, and there still is kind of a rump Inflection that's continuing. But basically, that company, a lot of people don't have high hopes for, and it's very clear they're not going to kind of live up to expectations because the compute costs were too high. And we've just seen two other companies, one get acquired by Amazon, one where the founding team was hired back into Amazon, another one where the founding team was hired back into Google. And I think we might see that trend continue because the costs of creating these AI models are so expensive right now.
Okay, well, we did get stock tip. I thought we were getting stock tip. And so for one more question in the back.
I'm curious about your thoughts on potential synergies with blockchain technology,
With blockchain.
specifically smart contracts becoming smarter, or using the AI, the blockchain authentication properties to help prevent deep fakes.
Yeah, so the one case where I've sort of looked at it is that second one about could you use blockchain as a way to authenticate content so that you wouldn't have to worry about deepfakes. I think it does have that potential, but again, blockchain's some of the other problems of blockchain tends to be, again, expensive to run, there's some latency issues. If you're talking about all the content created having to be put on a chain somewhere, I don't know how easy it would be to do that. But yes, I think there is a potential. There are definitely people talking about that. I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. It is, I think, if you didn't have so much data that you had to authenticate, it would probably be a pretty good solution to do.
Well, thank you all for coming.